So I always loved the show, and I think as my career was going on, I sort of realized I love these sort of like making of process pieces. And I think the first article I wrote about The Simpsons was about a message board in the early 90s where people were posting about The Simpsons and critiquing it. And I sort of thought it was really interesting because, we talk about the internet as this modern thing, like, fan culture on the internet is really toxic and it's miserable and it's people just sort of shouting into the void for no reason. But this stuff has really been around for a long time. This was like 1992, and people on the internet were talking about how The Simpsons was going to hell and it was, becoming horrible, and it was like unimpeachably the best show on TV and at its absolute peak. So I wrote an article about that for Slate, and that was in the early 2010s. And from then on, I started writing about the show like in dribs and drabs. Like I did a big ranking of all the best episodes, and I wrote about specific episodes, like an episode where Albert Brooks plays like like a tech billionaire that was like very prophetic in a lot of ways. And so I would say in the mid 2010s, I was like, I think I want to write a book about this show. It's really influential. I love it. Like there's nothing I want to write about more than The Simpsons. And I put together a proposal, and I think I was excited about it, but it didn't sell. And I sort of wondered why. And I think it was because I was trying to bite off more than I could chew. It's an American institution. It's been around even back then. It had been around over 20 years, and it was just too big of a story. And I would say like 3 years ago, at the Ringer where I work, we have a book imprint through Hachette at Grand Central, and I was like, okay, I'm going to revive this idea, and how do I do it in a way that's more digestible? And I think we're right in that peak 90s nostalgia zone. And if you think about The Simpsons, the best years of The Simpsons were from like 89 to the end of the 90s. It's a little arguable. And I think that really was the tidy narrative I needed to focus on because, again, it's such a big topic, but what the greatness of that show was really contained in that time frame. So that gave me the idea I needed to help sell it. At the beginning, it was Bart, who was, a fourth grader, a kid. And again, he was a normal kid in the sense that he was a wise ass. And what made him connect, especially to kids, was that he was so open about it. There was no, like, the warmth and fuzziness of it did show up, but what kids really and I think adults were attracted to was he just like was very anti-authority. And those kind of characters did exist in TV, but they were not as sort of blunt as Bart. And that was really novel at the time. And it scared a lot of people too. I mean, I mentioned my parents sort of at the beginning not really wanting me to see the show. They're pretty liberal and loose about this stuff, and they eventually got on board. But Bart was the type of character that caused adults to really freak out. Like there were Bart t-shirts that were banned in schools, and I think like that was something that made the show really splashy. So we have Bart, and then as the show progressed a little bit, it became Homer's show, and Homer was really like a mix of archetypes, like an Archie Bunker or Jackie Gleason from The Honeymooners, where he's an oaf, he's funny, he's lazy, he's sweet, he's angry, and he would do anything for his family. And as the writers sort of matured, they realized, I think, that they could do a lot more with Homer than Bart in terms of like story. It just sort of expanded the show when it became more about Homer. The thing about The Simpsons is, at the beginning especially, is that it really was realistic, at least, the themes of it. And so Mr. Burns was just a one-note evil boss, and like who can't identify with that? And it's funny that he was originally supposed to look like Mr. Spacely from the Jetsons, like a little squat guy. But one of the kind of the founding fathers of the show, Sam Simon, just was like, no, he should be kind of bird-like. They wanted to make him look as, crotchety and evil as possible. And he kind of got stretched out, and like that, he has like a beak for a nose. And that is what I think adds to his sort of unlikability. It was a phenomenon, and I think the hardest thing narratively was trying to make sure I could move the book along at a brisk pace, considering so much happened at the, in the first couple years of the show. So just to give you an example, like the merchandise craze of The Simpsons was like an 8-month period that they sold 15 million t-shirts. And I remember we were in editing, and my editors kind of smartly were like, wait, this happened in a matter of like 6 to 8 months? And I said, yes. And I think the hard part was sort of cramming all this stuff that was happening at the same time, kind of creatively and like culturally. And once I got over that hump, like it was, easier to keep it chronological. Like, 9091 happens, there's a lot going on. And then it kind of unfolds a little more smoothly after that. The MVPs of this book are the writers. They're hilarious. Every single person I talked to had amazing stories, very smart guys, mostly Ivy League educated Harvard guys, which is, again, sort of a building block of the show, former Lampoon people. But that's not all, like I talked to marketing people, I talked to Fox execs, just like people that saw the show unfolding in terms of its impact. Like there's a marketing executive, his name is Al Ovadia, who is really interesting because, he started working on the show when The Simpsons was just a series of shorts on the Tracy Ullman show. And people don't realize, like, they sold, or rather they licensed The Simpsons for a Butterfinger commercial before the full length show even premiered. So what happened was he was struggling to sort of license The Simpsons for like school supplies and t-shirts. And then the show premieres and it's like crazy. He had people coming to him at trade shows, just like begging for any kind of product placement. Like people were like, we want Simpsons toilet paper. We want Simpsons condoms. We want, action figures, toys, breakfast cereals, anything. And that alone, like that could be a whole book alone.